Okay, so thank you everyone who came. I'm very glad to see you in this company of beautiful ladies. We are going to discuss another lady practitioner, a very, very great practitioner in the Lama. I'm happy to have this opportunity. This is very inspiring for me. I hope this is inspiring for you also. And I wanted to start with a little metaphor. So when we tell a story, we can tell it in different ways, and it's like painting a picture or making a painting. So it can be like more realistic, it can be hyper realistic, it can be impressionist, or maybe it's very, very super detailed. So we can discuss the story in various ways, just like a painting can be in different styles. And I'm not sure what style this story is gonna be, but maybe a bit more closer to impressionist style, because I'd like to discuss some of the moments with you.
Really.
So
Translation app. Ja, Jacques.
we need translation. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll set up the translation.
It's our composer and guitarist from the song we made.
Okay, the translation is on. Yeah, so today we are going to talk about Sera Khandro, and maybe from time to time I'd like to talk to you also. So, yeah. So Sera Khandro. So I think maybe you don't know so much about this person, and yeah, maybe I'm going to share my screen. And this is the book I read about her autobiography. So the author is Sarah Hayat or Sarah Jacobi. And maybe we can start with a little overview. So who was she? So she was born in 1892, and she's one of a very few women who played a significant role in the history of Dharma. And she's one of the root gurus of Chögyam Rinpoche, and Chögyam Rinpoche is one of James' gurus, so she has this significance for our lineage. That's why I think we should know more about her. We should discuss her a bit more. And she wrote her own autobiography, and she also wrote the biography of her spiritual consort, Dwima Özer. So, and as Mada previously mentioned, she was a manifestation of Yeshe Tsogyal. So, and she had also Yeshe's feature. She was a treasure revealer. So she was revealing treasures, and she left the treasure of your biography for us also. So, and her life was extremely, extremely dramatic, very dramatic, unbelievably hard, but also, as in a good movie, it has very romantic details also. So her love for her partner was very immense, and they didn't spend so much time together, only 4 years. So during the most of her life, she was away from him, and she was in very hard circumstances. So we can sympathize, and we can think of circumstances and what role they play in our Dharma life. So I'm just going to check if there are some people who are joining. So yeah, this is like an introduction. And so she escaped from home at the age of 15. And when we read biographies, like many lamas or many great teachers also escaped from home at some point. That was quite interesting. Like Buddha Shakyamuni escaped from home, Padmasambhava escaped from the palace. So this is interesting that also in her life, also she escaped from home to pursue her religious life. But if we start from the start, If we start from the start, so she okay, so she was born, as we said, in 1892, and she was of kind of mixed origin. So her father was Chinese, or actually, um, some people think that actually he was Mongolian. So Chinese was a term for everyone who is not Tibetan. So Asian but not Tibetan. So actually he was Mongolian. So, but her mother was Tibetan. So, and she had this mixed origin, and it also was very significant in her life. So she was born without causing any pain to her mother, like in miraculous circumstances, of course. So, and yeah, there's this description about her birth being very miraculous. So she had letters in 5 places, and her birth was accompanied by lots of signs of being blessed by the kings. Interesting. The kings actually had great significance in her life, and the visions of the kings were very significant also. And I also see this little screenshot for you. So, so her autobiography contains 88 visions, which comprise 46% of the text. So even in her autobiography, like we're going to talk about her dramatic life, many events that happened, but still, so visions were extremely important. I think I'm speaking too quickly, maybe. I can wait. Okay. Should I make pauses? Okay, I can make pauses a little bit so that my dad can translate, right? Okay, sorry. Okay, go. Yeah, so, and yeah, and we have some statistics about her visions, like 55% of female, and 27 male, and some include both. So quite interesting. I wonder if in her life, her dramatic circumstances were more important for her, or these visions. Maybe for her also, the visions were more important, and like at least half of her life was like this. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, so she was born of a mixed origin. And there were some tensions between like Chinese and Tibetan culture in her life, and her parents like were different, and so yeah, even there was some uncertainty about which year she was born, because according to Tibetan system it was 1 year, according to Chinese system it was another year. So like, even in this they had certain misunderstanding between the cultures. Quite interesting. Yeah. Also, her father had some plans for her life. He wanted her to be a political leader. He wanted her to learn Chinese, and her mother, her Tibetan mother, wanted her to get Tibetan education so that she would become a nun. So her parents had different views about how her life should be. And so she had to learn Chinese, and she didn't want to do that. Imagine you're very little, you're a little child, and your father wants you to learn Chinese. Are you happy? So, and she recalls throwing all of her Chinese books into the river, and she was thinking whether she should also jump into the river herself. So, on this page we don't have information about this, but in other place of the book yeah, we have this, that a very fierce Dakini appeared at this moment when she wanted to jump into the river and said, "If you jump into the river, I'll kill you." And she's like, "Okay, okay, I'm not going to jump." So in this story, this is a marvelous story because, whenever we are in trouble, we are not alone. Somebody knows. Some of them know, and yeah, and we can get help sometimes in very unexpected ways. I think it's very, very beautiful. And I talked to a friend recently. I even asked for her permission to tell this, but I'm not sure if I should tell this. Yeah, but we were talking about how this was in her life also. So whenever she was in trouble, she suddenly got help. So, like, for example, she like suddenly met a nun, like a Tibetan nun, like on the street, and got help from her. So this kind of help. So, or sometimes somebody just reaches out, like a friend reaches out, or like we see a sign or something. So in our life, we can also see this. So we get help very often in unexpected ways. As we'll see later, it wasn't her only moment when she thought about suicide. Gosh, so dramatic. Okay, but let's continue with this. But even though her father was very strict and wanted to pursue her like political career, and he wanted her to learn Chinese, but actually her Dharma studies also were inspired by her father, because he was a Dzogchen practitioner, and due to his help, she also could get some teachings. And as a child, she was very devoted to Dharma. If you think of your childhood, what were you doing as a child? But she was reciting the six-syllable prayer, so, and she was trying to inspire other children to practice also. And at the age of eight, she had her first treasure revelation experience. 8 years old, in which she pulls a ritual dagger partway out of a rock. And this is just, if we stop for a moment, she was 8 and she revealed the treasure. How great is this Lama? Just think about this. And of course her father was impressed, and he sent her back to the caves. Hey, go look for more treasures. Yeah, she's 8 years old and she's already practicing Dharma in these ways, which so I don't know. I don't even know how to describe this. So, and then so when she was 8 years old, yeah, she met one of Lamas, Khandro Rinpoche.
Dar agua, de entrada te lo agradecería mucho. O kombucha.
Oh, something happened to
Puede ser.
okay. Yeah, so who said that this girl is an emanation of a lady Shakya Hayagriva. So when she was little, already she met a Lama who recognized that she was a great practitioner. And then, while her father was having some plans for her to be a political leader, yeah, she of course didn't want to do that, and she prayed to Yeshe Tsogyal, who came to her in a vision, and maybe she helped her in some ways because her father gives up on these plans later. So Yeshe Tsogyal was very, very important for her, one of the female divine figures who she communicated with a lot. But not only her, other the kings also. Yeah, also when she revealed this dagger from a rock, also, yeah, she had a vision of a bikini. Also, so in her life, always she had these encounters with bikinis, also with nature spirits, and so her life was filled with this. And she even thought that actually a mountain deity was her real father. So a mountain deity, Nyanchen Tangla, appears before her and says, "I'm actually your father." And then she thinks, "I'm not going to think of my father, my Chinese father, as my real father, because my real father is actually a mountain deity." Interesting. And also, this is an interesting detail about her childhood, because when she was 11, she was able to cure people of smallpox by reciting mantras. So she had healing abilities, and she had them from early childhood. Remarkable. And then her father asked her, "Oh, how do you do this?" And she told him. So this is very interesting. And then her father wants her to marry some Chinese leader, and she again becomes very unhappy. She was very, very depressed because she didn't want to marry. She wanted to do Dharma. And then she decides to kill herself again, and she attempts suicide by drinking a mixture of opium and alcohol. But just at the right moment, her father discovers what was happening and made her drink some oil, and so that she vomits. So yeah, she's only like, I don't know, 15 years old, and already she wanted to kill herself twice. What a dramatic life. Anyway, she was saved again, and also it's quite interesting. So as marriage plans are finalized, she experienced multiple visions again by lots of figures, including Vajrayogini, Sarahapata, and others. She also travels to the land of Yama, the lord of death, as one who returns from the dead. So interesting experiences again for a child. She was a child. So, and then when she's 13 years old, Vajravarahi appears to her in a dream and empowers her in the 2 treasure cycles that she will spend the rest of her life revealing and teaching. 13 years old. Okay, so she was already a Terton, a treasure revealer, when she was a kid. For us, 13 years is quite young. At that time, maybe, yeah, already parents had some plans on, oh, this girl has to marry, but for us nowadays, I think 13 years old is such a young kid. Okay, so there is some description of this moment when she met Vajravarahi, but I don't think we have the time to talk about this in detail. Nada, are you okay with the translation? I'm sorry, I'm just talking continuously. See what she writes. Oh, you want to translate the dimension? Yeah, because this is difficult. Oh, I really try to make pauses, okay? Sorry, guys. Okay, so in her life, when she writes about herself, she always talked about her inferior body, and she thought a lot about being a woman. But was it her inferior body, or was it the Tibetan culture that actually made it difficult for her? And we know this famous conversation of Yeshe Tsogyal with Guru Rinpoche, when Guru Rinpoche tells you that her female body is not inferior, is not low. I think maybe everyone knows about this. And as she was a manifestation of Yeshe Tsogyal herself, so this was very important for her also. Okay, so, and then, as I mentioned before, when she was 15, she ran away from home. That was a very important point in her biography. And that happened after she met her teacher and future counselor, Jemai Özer. So he arrives and they meet, and she looks at him and tears flow from her eyes. And she says, in all of my lifetimes, may I never separate from you. When she just sees him from the window. And then she decides to run away. And one evening, she just runs without anything, just a few snacks in her pockets, just climbs down and catches up with Jemai Özer, who was departing. And at her home, she had a very comfortable life. Just like Buddha Shakyamuni had a very comfortable life in the palace, but she runs away and she encounters this life of a nomad. So she experiences great hardships. And she didn't have anything. She didn't know how to boil water. She didn't have a bag where she could put tsampa. So there was a moment when some nomads gave her tsampa, and she puts it in her shoe because she didn't have anything else to put it in. And everyone laughs at her because they think that she's crazy. And then she gets help from some woman, who shows her how to boil some tea. She didn't know anything. So she said, okay, you put the top on the rocks, pour the water in. So she didn't know how to make tea. She didn't know anything at all. And she's like alone well, not alone, but she was like new to this life. And as a nomad, she didn't know what to do. So she near starvation, almost freezes to death. She didn't have any clothes suitable for this traveling. She didn't know how to survive. Well, eventually, of course, she gets some clothing, food. She becomes settled more or less. And it wasn't easy for her to become accepted in this nomadic society. Even Jemai Özer initially wanted her to go back because this life is hard and her family would be angry. So, yeah, so they Okay. And after a long journey, they arrive to the Jom Lingpa's main Darsang monastery. And Jome Özer is one of the sons of the Jom Lingpa. So they return to his home. And she's an outsider. She didn't speak the same language, the same dialects. It was very hard for her. Also, Jome Özer had another concert, a Kyonza, and of course she wasn't happy that another girl appears. So there was a lot of jealousy there. But Jome Özer helped her regardless, secretly, even though they didn't live together at that point because she was still very young. Actually, they weren't together until she was 30 years old. So they are still not really together. So she goes to some other family and lives there as a servant. So she becomes a servant, working in some family home. And of course, it wasn't easy. This was a difficult life, but that's also the time when she starts to get some teachings. So you can see here some information about what teachings she gets. Salon, Tugao, Cho, many things. She starts to do nonjo. And what really amazes me, she did 100,000 prostrations in 17 days. Can you imagine? 17 days only. So she was doing like 6,000 prostrations within a day. If some of you are doing prostrations, this is very hard. I don't know how she did this really. And also, quite an interesting detail here, that while she was doing it, other people were actually mocking her. Like, they put like grass on her back. Yeah. So they picked up like dog shit and wanted to and give her on a spoon. So that wasn't very, nice to her. Alisa say, I do 100 daily. Yeah, imagine doing 6,000. I don't know how she did this really. So also interesting, that people mocked her. So weren't very kind to her. So like we have this idea, like Dharma practitioner is someone who should be respected, at least in this Dharma society in Tibet. But it wasn't always the case. And also there's this detail that they had some events, and she couldn't even stay because they thought she shouldn't stay there because she's a woman. You woman, get out. So she encountered such hardships also. And she's only 16 at this point. And of course, Vajravarahi appeared to encourage her, to help her. Don't give up, it's okay. Then she's 17, she doesn't have any warm clothes. and she goes to live with a nun. They have an interesting conversation about whether one should be a nun or not. Yeah, this is interesting. This is another question that we could raise. Then she gets an invitation to visit another treasure revealer, Garaterchen. But he also had another consort who wasn't happy about this, and because of that, yeah, she cannot help him with his health. Because the reason why she got this invitation is that she could probably help him cure his illness and live longer. But because his wife was very jealous, she only let Sera Khandro to come to him when he's already on his deathbed, when he's already dying, and it's too late to help him. But anyway, so she becomes a little bit famous already. So she gets invited by someone. So people start to call her Dakini. So she already has some fame. And then another important moment in her life occurs when she attends an empowerment given by a lama named Khandro Gongwon. And the lama says, you have to marry Gara Gyaltsen, who is the son of Gara Terchen and Yagzan. So, and she marries him. And this is not such a happy marriage. So if you remember, so his mother, Gyaltsen's mother, was the jealous woman who didn't let her come to Gara Terchen. So yeah, this family is not very welcoming to her. But still, she pursued this relationship for various reasons, I think. So one of the reasons is that she could maintain and protect Gara Terchen's treasures, his teachings. Another reason is that she saw this relationship as a way to solve her practical problems, because she didn't have any other financial support. She had to have somewhere to live. And her husband, Gyaltsen, wasn't how to say, supportive of her religious career. So once she takes out a treasure vessel, offers it to him, and he says, "What is this? You're a woman, you cannot reveal a treasure. This is nonsense." Yeah, then she has a daughter. Again, yeah, her husband isn't very supportive. Let's proceed further. Yeah, so also this is interesting. So once she was out collecting firewood, she had some visionary experience, she returns home late, and Gail says, slaps her and throws her out of your house. So they have a fight. On another occasion, she was going to reveal a treasure, but she suddenly goes back instead, so she doesn't reveal this treasure, because if she doesn't go now, her husband will scold her, and also she was worried about her young daughter. She had a little daughter. So family, yeah. So for her, it was quite difficult to have a life of a mother and wife together with pursuing her Dharma career. Sometimes they were not corresponding very well, and it was difficult for her to be both a wife and a practitioner. Then she has another child. This child is a stillborn child. So a boy is like dead when she gives birth. She lost her child. So she lost a child, and her family, her mother-in-law, who didn't like her very much, accuses her that she probably killed her child because why didn't you die while giving birth? So maybe you just lied to everyone. So they were extremely hostile to her. So this is how the family treated her. This is so dramatic. I don't know. Like she lives in this environment of jealous women, unsupportive husbands, and yeah, her child died, and this is very dramatic. I don't know. This is a lot of pain. And then when she's 24, her husband Gyaltsen talks to Jimmy Ozer, and also it's an interesting part of the culture. They discuss her future without her. And they decide, okay, you can go to Jimmy Ozer and be his consort. Later, she actually went back again, and she only reunited with Jimmy Ozer finally at last when she was 30. So it wasn't so easy for her in any way. But anyway, at this point they meet. She meets Jimmy Ozer, and they exchange teachings, and they have very beneficial relationship. And many obstacles are pacified. So when they are together, life becomes very, very peaceful and very prosperous for both. Then she has her third child, second living child, who already died young, as we'll see later. Yeah, so she gives birth to a son. And then, due to various circumstances, she returns again to Gyaltsen. She becomes sick. So she had arthritis. She could barely walk. And Gyaltsen doesn't believe that she's sick, so she wasn't treating her very, very well. She's again, feeling very bad. And my other also feels very bad without her. How dramatic is this? And then finally, when she's 30, she reunites with Remy Other again, and they stay together until his death, and he dies in 4 years. So they only spent 4 years together. And when she returns to him, as I mentioned before, like she could barely walk, she had arthritis, and so this union heals her, so she can walk normally again. And so, and during this time, these 4 years that she spends with Jimmy Other, I believe she attains Buddhahood. She reaches attainment with him together. But then things get worse again. So her son dies because they have a plague at that time. So her son dies, and then Jimmy Other dies also. And she goes to live in Sera monastery. And since then, she's called Sera Khandro. Because Jimmy Other's closest disciple helps her and invites her to live there. Her name was Sotru Rinpoche. And at this time, she feels extremely lonely because she only has a daughter, like she had a stillborn baby, her son died, her beloved died, and she's very depressed at this moment. But at least she has a home. So she now has a home, and she begins to teach the Dharma. So she teaches a lot. I'm not focusing on exactly what she teaches because that would be a big topic. Oh, and she dies at the age of 48, I think. Yeah. She reveals some more treasures. So that was an overview of her life. Something else here. Yeah, so when we talk about this story, we can see it from various perspectives. And we could also discuss it from various perspectives. And we can focus on her being a woman and the way she was treated by the society, by this society which has patriarchy as a very common pattern. And of course, from the point of view of Dharma, at least, yeah, Buddha is not male or female, and we are not actually male or female. So our potential is not limited in any way by this embodiment. Or we could think of her as a manifestation of Yeshe Tsogyal and think of how her life corresponded with the Yeshe's activities as a treasure revealer. So Yeshe was hiding the treasures, and Sera Khandro was revealing these treasures, and in this way they had a certain connection. Or we can think of the role of different factors that influence life of a practitioner and life of a treasure revealer also. So for treasure revelation, there should be various factors that have to come together. That was also very interesting for me to hear. I didn't know. So there should be like proper time, proper place, like proper connections. So also there should be like male and female. So one can reveal more treasures if one has a consort. Also, there are some interesting descriptions of how they reveal the treasure and like what it looks like. So there should be like a special time and special place, and then there are some protectors of this treasure, and how they communicated with them also, and how all this happened. This was very interesting for me to read also. But also she did it often in secret. So when like even her disciples asked her like, smells like a treasure, and she's like, no, I can only give birth to babies. I don't reveal any treasure. So she like very jokingly speaks about this. So the activity of this revealing a treasure, she compares to giving birth to a baby. Also very interesting because, yeah, it needs also the connection of male and female energies. So this can be compared. Very interesting. I also wanted to have at least a little discussion. I spoke a lot, so maybe you guys have something to say, because this is such a profound, interesting story, very inspiring, very dramatic, very romantic also, and it can I don't know, be an example for us of how a life of a practitioner who succeeded despite everything, how a life of a practitioner can be, like how a real life was. So what do you think? What do you find interesting? What do you think of this culture, which had such an impact on her life? What do you think of the role of a woman in the Dharma life? I don't know. What are your thoughts about all this? Maybe someone can share. What do you think?
Можно я?
Mhm.
Я сейчас читаю книжку Кильян в переводе на русский язык «Женщина Тибета». И там как раз вот эта вот тема обсуждается, насколько уклад местный влияет на жизнь женщин. Вообще, эта писательница, она как бы немножко феминистка такая начинающая, как бы, и она, я так поняла, что она пионер вот в этом феминизме тибетском, и она очень с такими эмоциями об этом рассказывает. В частности, там была история с ее родным братом, который был влюблен в ее подругу детства, но не мог на ней жениться, потому что она была дочерью кузнеца, и она была, ну, типа, как считалось, что она такая испорченная из-за того, что
Да.
вот ее отец был кузнецом, производил орудия там для убийства
Давай
животных.
немножко переведу, а то тут народ не понимает, что ты говоришь. Yeah, it's translated a bit. She says that she's also reading a book about women in Tibet. And yeah, there are also lots of stories in it, like, for example, how culture and how society influences life of a woman. And there are lots of rules, like who you can marry, like if your beloved is like a craftsman, for example, your parents can say, no, this is not for you, and like this.
Вот, и, в общем, его родители ему подобрали невесту, и он был вынужден согласиться на ней жениться, хотя он ее не любил. И как бы со временем, конечно, они там притерлись друг к другу, и она там ему сыновей родила и все такое. А вот эта вот девушка, на которой он хотел жениться, она в итоге стала монахиней.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a story when like parents make arranged marriage, and like so they couldn't even choose who to marry. Parents decided. Yeah, so yeah, these kind of stories. What are your thoughts about this?
Про практику простирания еще. Вот то, что ты говоришь, что ты не можешь себе представить, что человек может сделать 6000 простираний в день. Я видела документальный фильм про тибетцев, которые идут вокруг Кайлаши, делают кору, обход.
Mm-hmm.
Вот, и там была группа, которую вел маленький мальчик, и монахи, которые за ним следовали, они сказали, что именно мальчик вот был таким зажигателем этого паломничества, и они как раз делали по 5-6 тысяч простираний в день, то есть они делали 2 шага и простирались, потом 5-2 шага и простирались. Я думаю, что зависит от того, насколько человек молод, потому что Сера Кhandро, когда делала нёндра, она же была молодой девушкой, у нее суставы не болели, так что все возможно.
She says she saw a movie about people doing Kora around Kailash, and they also did 5,000, 6,000 prostrations a day because they were like one step prostration, plus step prostration, like this. So she says it's possible only when you are very young, like a child. And later you have all kinds of problems with knees, and so you cannot do this anymore. Yeah, also, I also wanted to talk about this like role of circumstances in our life, because yeah, we can think of her life being very dramatic, but she always had like helpful forces, unhelpful forces. So always like some circumstances were very auspicious, some were negative. So it was always like this, and maybe in our life also we can see this. Like some forces influence our practice all the time. And usually we don't even talk about this, but if you think about it, I'm sure you can find some examples of helpful forces and unhelpful forces. Maybe, I don't know. If someone is willing to share this kind of stories, they are usually secret. But you can think of them at least.
I suppose when I hear stories like that, the difficulties are very explicitly described and largely external. And in some ways, I'm very grateful that I live in a culture which is very different from the culture that Tibetan women lived in and still live in. And there seem to be some teachers who are revered for being feminine, quiet, gentle, not teaching. By their mere presence, they create harmony and good vibrations. And there are a few other teachers, women, who speak and sing songs. And then there are the nuns who are kind of a conglomerate and often not distinguished by any specific features. But hearing that story, we have our difficulties too, but they're often more nebulous or vague or not. You can't come up against them quite so easily if your parents forbid this, or if the land is harsh, or if you do not know how to make a pot of tea. These things can be addressed, they can be faced, they can be overcome. I think the difficulties many of us face in the West are more, what would you say, vague, and they're more individual and isolating. The culture, we don't live in a culture that's generally supportive of practice. And our histories and our myths and legends are very different. So, yes, Sera Khandro lived at a time when perhaps our grandmothers were alive. We could imagine she could be a genuine member of our family, or you could remember somebody who was born at that time. So she's within reach. And yet she's also out of reach culturally and in the society. That's some of my thoughts.
Yeah, that's interesting. She kind of had a different kind of troubles because at that time, if we imagine the beginning of the 20th century, so life was very different. But she was able to get lots of teachings, and she lived in a culture where it was possible even for her as a woman. Yeah, and we live in a culture where we have different kind of troubles. Like we have lots of distractions. For example, like we have like short attention span after watching too much on the screen, and so on. And also, I recently took to some friends, both from Western countries, and I was a little bit surprised because both had the same problem. They have this fear of losing their comfortable life. I was quite it was curious for me, because they have like maybe some very nice property, they have children, they have a very comfortable life. They are very afraid, they are anxious that this might end because all these things are happening in the world. And I was thinking, maybe the lucky one is the one who doesn't have all that. Like Sera Khandro, she didn't have a home. Well, she had children, but she had lots of troubles with them. Like they died, and they didn't bring her much happiness. And maybe she had only Dharma to cling to. She really didn't have a comfortable life at all. Life was always unstable, always unstable. So she had to rely on dakinis, she had to rely on teachings. So because she didn't have anything else to rely on, maybe, and we can see this as severe, hard circumstances, but maybe that was also a blessing, you know. In some way, maybe it was a blessing because she had only Dharma. If you have Dharma, everything else is not so important.
The focus was very clear, wasn't it? Your enemies are very clear. The forces against you are very clear. And she died young as well, didn't she? Arthritis, a very kind of, it's a very ordinary illness condition. You know, some of us maybe suffer from arthritis. We know what it's like. But yes, just because you're Buddhist and because you're an emanation of some special person and you discover terma doesn't mean you have a long life necessarily. A consort is supposed to give her man a long life, but the woman maybe didn't get it in this case.
Well, she did, but they didn't spend so much time together. So when she wasn't with him, she was always sick.
Oh, is that how it went?
Yeah, but with him, she felt better actually, so it worked for both. Yeah, quite interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I read a lot about this, like a roller concert, and yeah, about this. I didn't focus so much on this because it's quite an obvious thing, I think, maybe. But yeah, that could be also an interesting topic for discussion and how that works and how it is in the culture. Madame, maybe we should turn you off from translation so that you can talk to us. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one point that is a little bit polemic, but that's what appeared to me, is that I feel, in spite of being a patriarchal culture with many difficulties and all of the censorship of the feminine, freedom, I absolutely abhor. But I feel there is a sense of the duty to all, like to everything. You have to think that you are interdependent and that you shouldn't think only about your own life. And I feel in the Western culture, it's like I am free, so I do as I wish with my life. And I feel that that's a lot of confusion as well, because then we went to another extreme, which is to think that if I'm free, that means that I only think about what I want. And what does that mean if everything is borrowed? Nothing is mine. So this is something that's very fresh for me. How to be in life, but not being guided by this sign of our culture. You're a woman, you're free, you do as you wish. Which you is that? That's the question. Então, eu tava falando aqui que, apesar de ver essa cultura super violenta, patriarcal, etc., no Tibete, eu via uma consciência maior de interdependência, de interser, de pensar no todo. E que na nossa cultura a gente individualizou tanto que agora a gente pensa: eu sou uma mulher livre, eu tenho meus direitos, eu vou decidir o que fazer com a minha vida do jeito que eu quero. Que eu é esse? Baseado em quê? sendo que a gente sabe que tudo é emprestado, que nada é nosso e que a gente está numa interdependência. So, yeah, that's something challenging to me, is that how to use this freedom that the West gives, right, to women, thanks to many women. But at the same time, to do it through Dharma, for Dharma, with Dharma, this. Yeah.
So an interesting thing. So when we read all these biographies, these are always about women who relied on men and karma mudra practice. So if we think
Yeah.
of Padmasambhava consorts, this story also, like, she attained liberation together with her consort. But the history just doesn't remember the women, and there were probably multiple women like this who just dissolved into space without any man involved, and no one remembers. No one cares because.
Yeah. Então, ela estava falando que a gente precisa se lembrar dessa série de mulheres que, por causa de uma cultura patriarcal, a gente vê sempre essas histórias das mulheres dependendo de homens, cerceadas por homens, etc. Mas que tem milhares de mulheres que podem ter simplesmente se dissolvido em luz ou encontrado liberação que a gente não sabe, que ficam ocultas simplesmente porque é assim que é nessa cultura.
I like the way they do this.
Nothing. And that's what I want.
Like that meme. Oh, nothing, just what I wanted for my
Nothing.
birthday.
Just what I needed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I would like to say that I also agree with Barbara that nowadays the violence, the challenges that we have to face, they are not so clear and direct. I know, it seems to be more complex and vague and obscured. It's like a shower. Sometimes I feel like an atmosphere of nowadays, specifically the materialist paradigm, like everything very dry and fixed. And I know it's an appearance in my mind, but I know it's a collective karma as well. Então eu disse para ela que eu concordo também com o que a Bárbara falou, né? Que hoje em dia, antes estava muito claro, muito definido as forças, os impedimentos, etc. E que hoje é uma coisa mais vaga, é uma coisa mais, né? Essa violência é diferente, mais especificamente, por exemplo, a cessação desse paradigma materialista em que tudo surge para mim como muito concreto, muito duro, muito seco. E claro que é um surgimento da minha mente, mas que é também uma chuveirada coletiva. Yeah.
I think our main problem is not materialism. Our main problem is, number one, loss of emotions, and fear, anxiety, whatever, 5 poisons and 8 worldly concerns. And our other problem is subject and object, because even in this story, if we think of co-emergence, if we think of, okay, she always got help from the kings, and people have different approaches to this, different attitudes to this. I even talked to some friends, also I'm not going to name them, but yeah, but some people say, but the kings are just in my mind. So there could be two extremes: seeing them as like separate and see them as other, or seeing them as like, oh, that it's me. And these are two extremes. And actually, this co-emergence is something in between. Like this co-emergence, like co-arising, and we don't really get it. And this is also a problem. And even in this story, all these forces, natural forces, and like people and deities and everyone who was somehow influencing her life, it was also a co-emergence. And the culture is also a part of this. And we can think of this as, how do we see the world? Do we really see it as co-emergent or not? Or do we see it as me and other?
Ela estava falando que tem uma série de questões que ela não acha que não é nem só a questão materialista, mas essa experiência de coemergência, que muitas vezes a gente vê as daquines são só uma experiência dentro de mim, ou na minha mente, ou são um evento acontecendo fora, e que, na verdade, a gente tem dificuldade para realizar essa coisa que não é nem uma coisa nem outra, é essa coemergência, né? A gente conseguir ver que é uma série de fatores e que sujeito e objeto emergem juntos. Yes.
Just another little thing, with the representation of Padmasambhava, the staff, the stick that is under his arm, that represents his consort. As you know,
Yes.
and it seems quite sort of you could have ideas about,
Yeah.
what,
Utilitarian.
why is a woman just represented as a stick, as a staff, as a brush, as an implement, and
Oh, I read
that
some story about this.
Let me
yeah.
just say to Jaque.
Okay, you
Então,
can
uma
translate and then later.
interessante é que na imagem de Padmasambhava, quando a gente vê aquele ferro, né, na mão dele, aquilo ali é para representar a consorte dele. A gente pode imaginar como que uma mulher, né, é representada por esse pedaço de ferro, né, com as três cabeças, de certa forma, uma coisa meio utilitária.
That was very smart because I read some story. I'm not sure, but I think it was about Yeshe Tsogyo that actually he hid his actual concert in this stick because the path, the road was hard, so that it's easier for her to travel. He hid her in the stick, and she can like safely sit there and enjoy the ride, and instead of going through all the hardships of this traveling.
Ela ouviu falar, na verdade, tem certeza que o Padmasambhava meio que ocultou, escondeu a consorte nessa vara, e que ela, porque o caminho era muito duro, era muito difícil, ela podia confortavelmente, simplesmente ficar ali, não ter que se preocupar ou fazer nada, ela podia tá de boa.
What a perfect gentleman.
Que cavaleiro perfeito. I feel it's like a mixture. I don't know how much of the Tibetan culture is expressed in all that we received, in terms of images, etc. Because we know there's always this dance. Yeah.
Oh,
No,
hello.
little sentient being.
Another lady visited us.
But also, in Tibetan culture, class is so important. Not only are women can have very strong personalities and can have wealth in their own right, but the culture is very based on lower class, upper class, and these stories about where people are born, they always have a high birth. Their father is chief of this, head of that, the king of somewhere, king of somebody else. And I'm sure, or perhaps there were some women or men, low caste births, who disappeared into rainbows also. But the hagiographies, the stories, use the genre of using kings and queens and noble people, and that somehow they are the ones who deserve the good things because they have the good karma to be born in a high birth. So
É,
we have got a different idea. in a democracy or a socialist society about class, and that can be very offensive. I find, the way that class plays out and opportunities play out in Tibetan culture.
A Bárbara estava falando como também na cultura tibetana dava-se muito valor à questão da classe social, dos pobres, dos ricos, todo mundo, de certa forma, vem de um pai tal, de uma família tal, de um status tal, e aí você tem mais direitos por vir dessa família mais nobre. Ela tem certeza de que muitos homens de outros estratos que ninguém nem pensa e tal também desapareceram em luz de arco-íris e ninguém sabe deles. E é, isso, e que a gente aqui tem uma coisa assim um pouco mais democrática, né? One thing that I look for as a mirror in stories of women in Dharma is women who weren't already super, uber, past lives, mature for Dharma since the age of 4 years old, but have somehow some woman who was really, really got very deep into samsara, no dharma in sight, and then through causes and circumstances got to have, like Milarepa. We have the story of Milarepa, but even him was very powerful as already, this talent for spiritual power, but not women. So I'm always a little bit nowadays. It's like, yeah, it's a beautiful story, but it lacks a mirror for me. Yeah,
You
eu,
can
eu
become
disse,
such example.
yeah, it's mixed because I have a little picture of me like meditating at 5 years old in a hippie's family, but it wasn't, I didn't, anyway, que eu tava falando que eu fico esperando, eu fico contemplando ver espelhos de mulheres que não eram já super maduras do Dharma, aos 4 anos de idade já sabiam que queriam Dharma, e a dificuldade estava muito óbvia para elas, e elas vieram de outras vidas de Dharma, mas de mulheres que mergulharam muito fundo no samsarão mesmo, e que depois encontraram Dharma. And I find it very interesting how this plays out. How come Dharma becomes this this treasure, and where does that come from? And this mixture, I find it very interesting. Eu acho muito interessante como o Dharma de repente brilha na vida dessas mulheres e se torna um tesouro. Como assim? De onde é que vem isso, né? Yeah. Because, sorry, I'm speaking a lot. But I always find that in these women's lives, the difficulty comes from outside. I know I want the Dharma. I come from a Dharma past life, and I find difficulties. But I'm very much interested in the inner difficulties, like the hardship comes from inside, not from outside. Something like that. Eu fico interessada porque na vida dessas mulheres parece que elas sempre têm uma clareza em relação ao Dharma e tem muitos obstáculos do lado de fora. E me interessa, mas e quando o obstáculo é ela mesma, vem de dentro? When the obstacle is the woman herself, it's herself, or seems to be herself. Anyway.
we talk a lot about mental health, and we have that phrase, and we observe it in ourselves, we observe it in others. Some of the things that these yoginis and Khandros did displays as something that could be a mental health issue in our way of looking at it. But they don't write about it like that. That's not how it's presented, because it's presented from the point of view of the result at the end. There is a happy ending to these
Ela se fala
famous
muito de doença
biographies.
mental. Sorry, Barbara, you can continue. It's just that because if not, I miss this precious thing that you're sharing. Mas se fala muito de doença mental hoje em dia. Se a gente vê a história dessas mulheres lá no Tibete e tal, não se falava, não se denominava doença mental, mas se podia pensar muitas vezes em ver como uma doença mental. Essa mulher tá louca, essa mulher não está batendo bem, e de muitas formas, como isso pode parecer como doença mental hoje em dia, sendo que na verdade não é. Yes, thank you.
That's an interesting issue. Yeah, she wanted to kill herself twice. That's a mental health issue.
Ela queria se matar 2 vezes. Isso é uma questão de saúde mental absoluta. Yes, it's true.
I want to learn Chinese. Jump in the lake.
Chop, like, why not? Come on. Chop your fingers off, you know. You don't want to be married, milking goats.
Yeah, my chick also did this.
Corta os lugares, você não está querendo ficar ali. Yes. Yeah, in that sense, we have as women a karma of having been named crazy for many, many centuries. Like crazy, you're crazy. If you're outside of the norm, you're crazy. And that's quite dangerous because you can lose your freedom. So I think there's this fear that needs to soften, and this courage and trust in Dharma that needs to be, and all of the ways in which you can hide as a staff, or you can hide as whatever. Então, eu disse que geralmente eu imagino que a gente tem séculos e séculos de ameaça de sermos loucas, né, enquanto mulheres. Você sai da norma, você é louca. Isso pode ser muito, muito perigoso, porque você pode perder a sua liberdade, e que então as mulheres têm que achar meios hábeis de suavizar esse medo e entrar em contato com essa confiança no Dharma e achar meios de se esconder, como a vara de Padmasambhava, ou de achar meios de ficar invisível. We have to find ways to dance, right? Tem que achar forma de dançar.
Marie, you've got us all talking tonight.
Well,
And thinking
that
with
was
these
one of
stories.
my goals in this. You know, I always want to like have at least some discussion because, like, as I said in the beginning, like we can make this like a realistic painting, but we can make this as an interesting discussion because, well, why are we even interested in stories? Because we can relate to them, we can think about them, we can somehow compare our life to somebody else's, and this is what is important. Not only to know this year she did this, that year she did that. I think the most important part of this is relating to this somehow and thinking about it.
Que a Marie estava falando que é legal essa coisa de discutir, de partilhar, da gente poder trazer a nossa voz, etc. E não só ela nasceu aqui, ela viveu aqui, mas a gente trazer. A Bárbara estava achando legal isso. Alguém gostaria de partilhar? Caetana, Jaque? Ok.
Maybe someone else who didn't say anything
Yeah.
today wanted to share something.
Okay.
Maybe Jacqueline, Charo, I don't know, Oleg.
Ai, oi. Eu quero compartilhar um pouco, porque eu não
Like,
sabia muito sobre o que seria o encontro, e Madá convidou, mas assim, fiquei bem surpresa e me fez lembrar, quando eu tinha 17, 18 anos, eu tomei a decisão de entrar no convento religioso.
okay, so she said
Então,
know very well what the subject was about, but Madai invited and she came. And she has an interesting story in which at 17, she decided to go into a nunnery of nuns, Christian nuns, and become a nun. Okay.
e não que eu tivesse muito conhecimento da vida religiosa dentro, né, do cristianismo, da Igreja Católica, mas eu tinha uma atração assim pela vida contemplativa, enfim, uma vontade
But
de me
not that
conectar.
she knew very much about Christian life and the nuns and anything like that, but only that she felt already very much attracted to this spiritual plunging, spiritual life, dedicating yourself to that.
E muito interesse também, assim, muita admiração e muito encanto pela experiência de fé e de devoção.
A lot of admiration for the experience of faith and devotion.
E foi um tempo muito desafiador, porque eu passei quase 3 anos, né? Entrei, fiquei até o noviciado, e a minha mãe, ela rompeu assim comigo, né? Ela não queria me ver, então todo esse tempo a gente não se falava e não nos encontramos. E
It
algumas
was
vezes
it was a
minhas irmãs foram me visitar no convento.
Okay. She spent 3 years there. She went until the novice part, and it was challenging in her family because her mother cut her off. She didn't want to know about that, and only her sisters visited her in the nunnery.
Então, para ela não fazia muito sentido que se eu não ia dedicar a minha vida ao matrimônio, ao casamento, então ela falava que eu ficasse em casa, né? Que eu cuidasse dela, do meu pai, enfim.
Her
E
mother didn't.
ela não conseguia compreender.
If she wasn't going to marry and have children, she should just stay at home and take care of her in her old age, her father, etc.
E isso é muito curioso, porque eu escuto uma história como essa e algumas coisas me voltaram, né, as sensações do que como eu me sentia, né, de me sentir inadequada, de achar que eu estava fazendo algo errado, ou de sentir que a minha sexualidade era questionada, que se eu estava abrindo mão de viver um matrimônio, isso era muito. Minha mãe e meu pai me perguntaram algumas vezes se eu não tinha interesse em homens ou se eu me interessava por mulheres, então era uma coisa que ficava, muitos desconfortos surgiam, muitas questões.
Yeah, so many, and she relates very much to these stories because at that time she felt a lot of inadequacy and that she wasn't, adapting to the life her family and her culture wanted. And the parents questioned her sexuality too. If you don't want to marry, you don't like men, what's up with your sexuality and things like that.
Então, ouvindo essa história hoje me faz pensar hoje, né, como que eu me sinto hoje, como e se
So this
fosse
story
eu
makes
fazendo essas escolhas hoje, né?
how I feel today. How it would it be if I made those choices today? Because
Sim.
it's already
E
different.
E a reflexão de quais dessas questões ainda me amedrontam, né? Quando eu penso em dedicar a vida, assim, mais intensamente ao Dharma, a vida contemplativa, e vem tudo isso ainda um pouco, né? Talvez não mais as questões com a minha mãe, com o meu pai, mas tinha uma coisa que também era muito forte, que era um questionamento que era feito sobre a minha vida financeira, sobre a minha inteligência, sobre a minha dedicação aos estudos, à formação, ao trabalho, a vencer na
Yeah.
vida.
So it's very interesting because she still feel what are the impediments, the fears, etc., in following a path of surrendering to Dharma and living this life, not very much more in terms of her mother's opinion and her father's opinion, but in general, how she will be seen, and as well in terms of her financial life, economic life, and things like that.
Enfim, muito poderoso ouvir uma história como essa,
Very
porque
powerful.
não parece distante, né? É tão perto assim, me comove, me emocionou profundamente, porque não é algo
It
assim.
doesn't seem
Sempre
far
que eu
away.
escuto falar dessas mulheres, eu acho que é algo muito longe, e de alguma forma não é. Ainda está muito presente para nós mulheres essa realidade de possibilidade e de dor e desafio também.
I feel very connected to those women because sometimes when you see like life of Sera Khandro, it seems very distant and very far away. But when I hear them, I say they're not far away at all. I relate very much to what is there, and I feel it's very much close to women's experience nowadays.
Could I ask
Obrigada.
could I ask you, Jacqueline, a question? Actually, recently I've been thinking quite a lot about Buddhism and Christianity, and I kind of understood why they are not contradictory, but I'm not speaking much about this because I don't want to confuse anyone's minds with this. Because one has to have really broad thinking to see it in these ways, to see like how are different dharma paths and why are none of them contradictory. So, but what do you think about this, Jacqueline? Buddhism and Christianity, like how do they correspond in your head?
Essa visão e caminho cristão e o budista, ela fica curiosa. Como é que você vê isso em termos de diferença e confluência? Porque se a gente pensar nesse termo mais amplo, não se contradiz, né? Tem alguém que diz, indo para o topo tudo converge, né? Mas ela fica curiosa para saber, dentro da sua experiência, como é que você vê isso?
Não vejo, talvez hoje, depois do Dharma, do budismo, a visão ela é muito mais clara sobre o cristianismo e a vida religiosa que eu vivi,
After
né?
Dharma and
E
Buddhism, my vision is clearer about the Christian path.
então, mesmo a experiência de fé e devoção, que é muito rígida dentro da Igreja Católica, do cristianismo, da vida religiosa.
Even the experience of faith and devotion, which is very rigid in the Catholic Church.
No fundo, ela é muito, muito semelhante à experiência de fé e devoção que eu experimento, né, dentro do budismo, nas práticas tântricas, mas
At the
tem
core, fundamentally, it's very similar to the experience of devotion and faith that I have in the Buddhist path nowadays.
E eu acho que a pérola, assim, para mim, é a vacuidade, a visão da vacuidade por dentro de tudo isso.
Yeah, but what I feel is the pearl in what I'm practicing now is emptiness, the experience and the realization of emptiness in the Dzogchen path.
Então, foi muito poderoso quando eu era lá muito nova, com 17, 18 anos, até os
Very
21 anos,
powerful.
ter
17.
experimentado toda essa rigidez da prática. Eu lembro que a gente ficava muitas horas de joelho,
To
ou
have
em retiros
experimented all
profundos
of
de
the
silêncio.
rigidity of the practice. I remember we had to stay hours on our knees praying, etc.
Mas agora isso tudo tem a mesma profundidade, o mesmo sentido para mim me libertaram também lá atrás, mas agora é um pouco não, é imensamente mais aberto, mais vasto e mais livre.
In those days when I was young, it gave me a sense of a lot of deepness. It freed me in many ways. It gave me many insights. But nowadays, I feel it's immensely more freeing. It has much more space than what
Então, eu já digo que se eu tivesse escutado, ao menos falar que existia o Buda naquela época, teria sido incrível ser uma freira.
So what comes to me is that in those times, if I had come if I in contact with the fact that there is a Buddha and there is a Buddhist path, I would have most certainly become a Buddhist nun. It's what she feels.
Beautiful. Okay, so is that it for today? Or does anyone want to share anything else?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should. Oh, okay, let's dedicate merit and yeah, let's go proceed with our lives. Okay, the merit. Gyātīnya dōdā kēnā tūgyōne Tōjīcā marupā dēsālago pāśo. Thank you, everyone. A big hug to all of you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Nice to meet.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing,
you.
Jacqueline.
Obrigada pela partilha, Jaque.
Пока, ребята.
Bye.